going to start immediately with a video. Thank you.
It all began with a good idea. In the 1920s, coolants in refrigerators were so toxic that a leak could kill you. So we invented safer chemicals to do the job, CFCs.
The wonder chemicals of the 20th century.
They were so versatile, people's lives were transformed. Fridges, air conditioners, aerosols, cleaners. We couldn't get enough of them. But then, Mario, a chemist from Mexico, worked out that maybe they weren't so wonderful after all. He predicted that the Earth's natural sun shield, the ozone layer, was being eaten by CFCs at a terrifying rate.
We felt a great responsibility to actually warn society that something could happen.
Chemical companies didn't like the sound of his warning. His research threatened $1 billion industry.
Destroying a perfectly good and useful product is absolutely wrong.
So they rushed to question his work. But the scientists fought back. All eyes turned to the ozone layer. And then to this guy. Sure enough, there was an enormous hole in the stratosphere. And Jonathan Shanklin had found it.
It was such a shocking revelation. Over half the ozone layer destroyed above Antarctica in a decade.
If the destruction wasn't stopped, we'd be fried by the sun's rays.
It's a big problem.
We'll have a blind, burnt population. We might have to become nocturnal in order to escape.
The US needed a leader to stand up to industry and ban CFCs.
Trust me.
But they were out of luck.
Ronald Reagan's record on the environment left a lot to be desired.
So environmental lawyers, economists and scientists built an argument so strong that the president simply couldn't ignore it.
We pretty much backed him into a corner.
And this guy had the president's ear.
I was Secretary of State for President Reagan.
They talked it over.
We talked it over.
And Ronnie, who had skin cancer on his nose,
Stay out of the sun.
understood the threat from the sun's radiation.
He became convinced it would be a catastrophe.
So in 1987, with America leading the way, more than 30 countries agreed to phase out the production of CFCs and signed the Montreal Protocol. It worked. With CFCs now banned, the ozone hole is healing. Humanity saved. And Mario won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. But today, a new disaster movie is unfolding. Global warming. The lead actors have changed, but the drama's the same. Life on Earth is, again, in danger. If today's leaders learn and phase out the chemicals causing the damage, there's still time for a happy ending.
All right. Here we are. Thank you all for coming to this Pitch Hub. I hope the movies capture your attention. You may be wondering why we were showing a movie summarizing the success of the Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol is considered one of the most successful international agreement, legally binding agreement, that phased out ODS. And is also considered quite successful. Sorry. Yeah, I don't want to go on the stage. Is that okay? All right. I want to be in the middle. All right. It's also one of the most successful program in terms of climate change benefits. The reason we wanted to show this is because we really would like to see a similar success in achieving the next challenge. The next challenge is, while we have phased out some ODS, ozone-depleting substances, to the benefit of the ozone, we still have chemicals that are high global warming potential. And to this effect, the parties of the Montreal Protocol agreed on an amendment in 2016, October 2016, called the Kigali Amendment, to phase out ODS while achieving energy efficiency improvements. It's a great opportunity for the government, for consumers, for the industries that we would like to really discuss with you because we think that this is a very, very urgent challenge. If you think that the demand for cooling and air conditioning in particular is growing at a rapid rate, in some middle-income countries it's 15% growth rate. If you think that while in the United States more than 90% of households have an air conditioning in the room, countries, emerging countries, are not quite there. China, 60%. India, 5%. That's where the demand for cooling is going to come in the next 20, 30 years. So what we want to see, of course, is for all countries to provide cooling to their people. This is good for health, it's good for productivity, it's good for comfort. But we want to achieve it without greenhouse gas emissions. How do we do that? And how do we do it at a level and a scale that is really as successful as the Montreal Protocol was over the last 30 years? This is the kind of discussion that we would like to have today, and we have two speakers. We have Professor Toby Peters is Professor of Cold Economy at the University of Birmingham, the only professor in cold economy that we are aware of. And he will tell us why cooling is such a important development issue and why it's so urgent to address it. And then we will have Mr. Soumya Prasad Garnaik from EESL, as you already heard, Energy Efficiency Service, India, and he is Chief General Manager Technical, and will tell us a little bit how the transformation of the sector is already starting in India, and he will give us a little bit of a sense of where India is. So, without further ado, I will give the floor to Toby. Thank you.
Thank you, and as you can see, I'm not Ian Crosby. Cooling for me is the Cinderella of the energy debate. We think about electricity, we think about heat, we don't think about cooling, and that is a glaring omission. If you step back, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals laid down a new challenge. Economic and social development and the environment had to live together, and no one was to be left behind. We had to have a world where everyone can live well and within the sustainable limits of our planet. And for me, cooling sits right at the nexus of that challenge, but it's ignored. The need for cooling is universal, and this is one of the challenges I think we face. It's universal, but cooling means very different things to different groups of people. So for us, it's an air-conditioned conference room. It's an air-conditioned office. It's even increasingly air-conditioned apartments. It's a fridge full of fresh food and convenience meals from all over the world. It's ice in our drinks. In Dubai, 50% of electricity is consumed for air conditioning, 75% of the peak, sometimes as much as 95%. America consumes more energy for air conditioning than the whole of Africa consumes for everything. 75% of our food goes through a cold chain. But what about the subsistence farmers, the slum dwellers, where the need for cooling isn't about simply a quality of life, our gin and tonic with ice, it's actually about life-threatening issues. In the developing world, a lot of markets, 40% of food is lost post-harvest, primarily because of no cold chain. So we've got a situation where 800 million people are globally malnourished, where malnutrition is the biggest cause of death for children, bigger than AIDS, malaria, and TB combined. We've got 750 million subsistence farmers, and we don't have cold chains to move the food from farm to market. And also, 600 million people fall ill from contaminated food. 420,000 die every year from food poisoning, primarily because of no cold chain. Look at the bigger picture. The third biggest emitter of CO2 after America and China is the production of food which doesn't make it to market. It consumes twice the volume of land of Australia and 3 times the volume of water of Lake Geneva. So if you want to solve the food, water, energy, land nexus, think about solving the cold chain. The challenge is inherently the cold chain runs on diesel. So when you look at those vehicles on our roads today, delivering our food to our shops and our restaurants and our hotels, 20% of the diesel drives that secondary engine at the back. But that pumps out 75% of the NOx and 95% of the particulate matter of the total vehicle. So what we have to do is we have to find a way to solve the challenge of cooling and deliver those societal and economic gains without creating an environmental catastrophe. And it's not just food chain. World Health Organization, 50% of freeze-dried, 25% of vaccines are wasted each year, primarily because of broken cold chains. We just saw about the impact of heat. 12,000 people annually die from heat waves. That figure is projected to come 260,000 by 2050, unless we do something about it. So with population growth, changing demographics, continued urbanization, climate change, there's no doubt we're going to need more cooling. In actual fact, by 2050, it's estimated that we will need 9.5 billion cooling appliances worldwide. That's 2.5 times where we are today at 3.6 billion. And despite the fact we're seeing the development of more efficient cooling technologies, even allowing for the most aggressive strategy, energy mitigation strategies, that cooling sector will increase its energy consumption by about 90% from where we are today by 2050, somewhere between 7,500 and 9,000 terawatt hours. But that's only half the picture. Under those projections, much of the world will still only have low levels of cooling penetration. We will still have unacceptable levels of food loss, people living, experiencing life-threatening temperatures without cooling, and losing medicines and vaccines. In actual fact, I'm doing a report, a scenario planning at the moment, and it's got to be peer-reviewed, but it's suggesting that cooling for all would require something like 14 billion appliances, not 9.5, 14 billion. And in actual fact, the amount of energy which will be required will be closer to 15,000 terawatt hours. That's, 2.5 times the 6.3 thousand terawatt hours, which is what's envisaged if we're going to hit the IEA's 2-degree scenario for cooling. So put simply, we have a problem. Yes, we're seeing the development of more efficient technologies, and yes, we've got to deploy them. But let's put it in context. If we're going to meet that demand, if we're going to deliver cooling for all sustainably, we're going to have to see about a 300% increase in efficiency, not a 20, 40, 50, a 300%. So that's going to require totally new, needs-driven approaches, rethinking how do we deliver cold, and in particular, thinking how do we transition from technology to a system? How do we harness the waste heat which we're throwing away and can use to drive cold? How do we harness the waste cold? By 2025, we'll be moving potentially 500 million tons a year of LNG around the world, regasifying it and throwing the cold into the sea, and 10 miles down the road burning diesel to produce cold. It's madness. We need to rethink the system, and we have to change the question, not how much electricity do I need to generate, but rather what is the service we require and how can we provide it in the least damaging a way? And when you do that, you start rethinking the problem. Do I need a lithium-ion battery, or if I'm driving an air conditioning unit and want to take peak energy off, do I need a block of ice? Think about a bus in a hot country. One of the big challenges for a bus is obviously electric buses is range. In a hot country, 40% of the energy consumption of the bus is to drive the cooling load. So actually, look at the bus as a system, use phase change materials or other technologies to solve the cooling load, and let the battery just do the motive power. But meeting these challenges, it's not just going to be around technology. We've got to think about society, business, finance, skills. Today, we have 3.5 billion cooling devices. The industry, globally, the cooling industry employs about 12 million people. So if we're going to have 9.5 billion, how many people is it going to need to employ? And let's not forget, most of our cooling devices today run very inefficiently because they're not cleaned and maintained. You can easily lose 20% of your energy by not maintaining the equipment. So if we're going to be at 9.5 billion, 14 billion, how many people do we need to have trained up to solve and manage those technologies? And the challenge is, how do we embed this approach now so we're ready and don't make the investment in highly polluting technologies? Of course, we've got to look at how we deploy the energy efficient technologies today. But we've got to start working through and think about the step change solutions, the radical technologies, and get them to market in time to meet the challenge. Of concern, investment into cooling research in the EU and UK today, where our cooling is projected to grow 70% by 2030, we spend less than 0.2% of our engineering research budget on cooling. Globally, despite what I've shown to you, hopefully, is about the need for sustainable, affordable cooling for all, only 0.1% of overseas development assistance is spent on cooling. So that's the challenge. In closing, may I simply say, clean cooling has the potential to advance 3 internationally agreed goals simultaneously: the Paris Climate Agreement, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and as we heard, the Montreal Protocol's Kigali Amendment. In other words, we can address poverty, reduce food loss, improve health, raise energy efficiency, manage our natural resources, support sustainable cities and communities, and combat climate change concurrently. Not bad for a fridge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toby. So, a little revolution we need. Let's see how we can start by looking at what India is doing. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here and to share my experience from India. And as we see, my co-panelist has already set the tone, how the cooling is very important and how it is going to actually put a challenge to the entire society, entire community, as far as the load management is concerned. Yes, India is growing. We are growing 6 to 8% per year. Right now, if you just see our, the entire electricity consumption stands at about 1,000 billion units, and 30 to 35% goes to the building sector. Maybe it is residential, commercial. I mean, it is huge. And 60%, 55 to 60% is only catered by the air conditioning loads. If you see the city like Delhi, the peak demand during this period, summer period, touched to 6 gigawatt, which is enormous. And between evening 7 p.m. to say 10 p.m., also 3 to 4 hours of time, the peak is so much high that it becomes very, very imperative for the, extremely difficult for the distribution companies to manage that load. And in the rest of the time, that load is not there. So that means the entire capacity, the infrastructure of the system is not utilized that much. So what is happening? We have tried to address this issue over the years with some policy interventions. We have our standard and labeling program in place since 2007. The average efficiency level of air conditioners right now, it stands at about 2.8, 2.9, which is well below than the developing countries. And we are working on that. We are working on how to go up and or improve the energy efficiency. She already told that 5% is the penetration level of the air conditioner system in India, which is very, very less. It may be more than 90% in the developing countries, 60% in China. So where as the economy is growing up, people are going to have more and more affordable situation. We believe that in the next 3 to 4 years, 5 years down the line now, so probably we can taste 50 to 60% of the penetration. So that means if you see the business as usual scenario, 150 gigawatt of power is required only to supply to the air conditioners by 2022. So that's the biggest challenge to us. And it can, even some estimation says that it can touch upon 500 million tons of CO2 emission. So then where we stand at? One is the supply side challenge. The other one is the peak load management, how we are going to do it. So efficiency improvement is one of the important parameter. So that is why Energy Efficiency Service Limited, what we did, we tried to bring up and try to see that whether we can go beyond the highest efficiency level available in India right now in case of air conditioner system. You can't believe by within next 3 to 4 years from now, India's RAC market, the refrigeration and air conditioning market, that fleet, that would be about 12% of the entire world. So we are actually, I don't know whether we are going in a right path or we are actually in a beaten path or not, but their policy or the thinking has to be as cohesive as possible for right now. So that is why Government of India has brought forward the National Cooling Action Plan. So this is going to be tabled before our Parliament by this September. Energy Efficiency Service Limited is supporting to the Government of India. I'm also leading in one of the thematic group. So we are seeing there how the market transformation can happen in that action plan, how we can bring newer and newer technologies to be in place. But the most important thing is a developing country like ours, we reach that the technology may be in place, but it should be as affordable as possible. So that is why exactly what we tried a newer technology, inverter-based air conditioner system with a energy efficiency ratio much higher than what is available right now in India. So it is 4.2, is that the highest level, but we went for 5.2. And we convened to the manufacturer, we discussed with them, can you give me 5.2 energy efficiency ratio, which is about 30 to 35% more efficient than the best of available one. But the manufacturer said, yes, we can provide you, but that may be, there may be an implication on the cost. So if the cost is going to be again 20 to 25% more, so probably this entire program would fail. And I remember when I discussed this matter with our ministerial setup, they said that this cannot be possible unless otherwise you bring down the cost. That means, can you give a 5.2 EER value at a cost of 5-star right now or a 4.2 EER now? That's the challenge. So that is why we went for a bulk procurement arrangement. Exactly the replication of the model what we did in the LED. So we went for 100,000 number of 5.2 EER AC's procurement. Companies participate to it, but we added the Kigali Amendment concept here also. We encouraged the manufacturers to go for low global warming potential refrigerants here. Although that was a very, very challenge, we faced a lot of challenges from the manufacturers and all. I'm not going to discuss all these things, sir. But yes, they participated in this. We went for R290 and R410. So those are the things we try to put it that. So now the 100,000 numbers are procured. The cost is arrived at. That is almost equivalent to the 5-star rated ACs. That means I am getting a big, good, efficient AC with a lesser price, but who is going to take it? So we have not actually approached to the common consumer in this phase. So what we attacked, we addressed this, the target group as the institutional consumers, the government buildings, the central government buildings, the railway stations, which are under government control. So we pushed to the government that why don't you give a directive to the government setups to use this equipment, air conditioners. So in that case also, that was a lot bit hurdle. When you see all these things, the directive also doesn't work when you compare it to the economics. So the payback period was a little bit higher. It was more than even 5 years. So people are not interested. The finance department of the government institute, which is going to procure your AC, they are not happy enough. So what we added, we put it as a package. We give the solution of air conditioners, LED lighting, ceiling fans. We made it as a package. So when it became a package, so it became more and more attractive. So right now we are operating on 10,000 number of buildings, and we hope so that this 100,000 number of air conditioners will be deployed in a very quicker time. My predecessor, he already told about the new technologies, the waste heat recovery that can be utilized for the air conditioning system. That is exactly what we have also touched upon. And this is the tri-generation concept, what we are working on that. Government of India recognizes this is one of the cross-cutting technology. It is already included in our National Cooling Action Plan, and EESL has been given the mandate to take it forward. So what does it mean? In a single source of input, that is your natural gas, you can generate electricity from the engine waste heat. You can generate the cooling with the vapor absorption system, and then also you can generate the heating. So with the single source, you generate heating, cooling, electricity. We did a market survey in India. 20,000 megawatt is the capacity where from the tri-generation you can develop, you can generate the electricity. And nevertheless, I don't remember how much tonnage of refrigeration can be there, but the enormous can go to in generating the cooling. So that means from the waste heat of the engines, which is generating the electricity, that waste heat can be utilized for the air conditioners. So you no need extra electricity from the grid to produce that cooling. So we are approaching to industries. We have now signed agreement with the Airports Authority of India, all our airports, hospitals, the commercial hotels, all these things, enormous potential. So EESL has already acquired a company from UK who are into this business of tri-generation, and that is also one of our major agenda, and we hope to invest about 250 million USD by 2020 in tri-generation concept. The other one is the district energy system. That is how you can go for, I think this is very, very common in your countries, in the developed countries, but it is actually novice in a country like India, where the infrastructure is going very, very high. Every year, bigger and bigger, cities are being set up, new greenfield projects are coming up. Now we are working with UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, how to go for a programmatic model in going for a district energy system where you generate your cooling at one place and distribute in a grid system to various buildings. That reduce your OPEX, that reduce your CAPEX, that reduce your overall operational efficiency. So we have constituted a national steering committee for this, in which I am the convener from the EESL side. It is being driven by the government, and I think the next few years we'll be having 6 to 7 district cooling program projects, big projects in India. And these are the new set of technologies, and probably the kind of line of credit we have got from different funding, agencies, banks, that can be utilized for this to make it a more viable, more adaptable in nature. The HPMP phase-out management plan, that is the HCFC phase-out management plan, that is also one of the major agenda by Ministry of Environment and Forest. So what we are trying to do, we have come out with a regulation, notification for the manufacturers that this current refrigerants being used, that has to be phased out by 2020. So in that way, we have created a massive awareness campaign for the manufacturers, for the user, that these are the things which needs to be in place. The preparedness should be there, that by 2020, they would be ready to manufacture the new set of equipments which will actually go for a low global warming potential refrigerant. EESL is working as a national project coordinator for the entire project. So we are not only the LED program, which is mostly addressing to a different set of aspects, but we are also approaching, or in the cooling context, we are also addressing the issue of new technologies, cross-cutting technologies that can not only bring the energy efficiency improvement, but it can also generate substantial investment in this sector as well as employment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have come to the closure of our half-an-hour pitch hub, but we have the advantage of being the last one. So I may take some freedom to ask if anybody has some urgent questions. In any case, we are around here, and you can also contact. You can sit there, if you want, if you have question, or we are around for contact. Please.
Thank you very much for that outstanding presentation. Holmes Hummel with Clean Energy Works. EESL is famous for working with utilities to deploy energy efficiency technologies at a cost that does not impose on the consumer and allows the utility to recover those costs so that the value proposition is attractive and market uptake is quick. You stopped short of describing the next phase for the air condition initiative after the central government gets the first 100,000 units. Can you tell us more about your vision for harnessing the size and scale of the power sector to deploy your cooling innovation equipment?
Well, if you just see the air conditioning market of India, about 4 million numbers of ACs, air conditioners, that normally come to the market every year. So these are the new fleets. So right now we are having more than 20 million number of air conditioner systems in India. So this is going to be a very big, the fleet is going to increase very. So what in terms of power market, already I already told you, it's 150 gigawatt of power is required in the next 2 to 3 years. So that itself is the challenge.
Please join us in 10 minutes on level 4 for Walk the Talk, translating climate ambition into investment opportunity.
If there are no hot questions, I think we would like to close the session so that you have a few minutes before the next plenary. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
And thank you to the speakers. Wonderful presentations.